and give the American people the facts.
A stark reminder of what we are up against. I'll lean into some of the things I mentioned now. Iran-backed enemies attacking our troops in the region 121 times since October 17th. Houthi terrorists going after commercial ships in the Red Sea. Remember, those are the Yemeni terrorists trained and paid by Iran. Hezbollah, the north of Israel border, Lebanon is where they launch from. And they've launched 40 rockets into Israel, and that happened just this past Saturday alone. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the Middle East trying to tamp down the threat of a wider war that could draw in multiple nations. The New York Times is reporting Iran's beefed up nuclear program shows they have so much uranium they could make 3 nuclear weapons in a matter of weeks, staring down the threat of wider war with a top official inoperative. Where was Lloyd Austin? Well, now we know. Should we have known as it was happening? Of course we should have. In focus now, Republican Congresswoman Kat Cammack. First, though, Peter Doocy, live outside the White House. Peter, I understand that John Kirby was just speaking on Air Force One, traveling with the president today. What have we learned from John Kirby?
So, Harris, it builds on what I was told first thing this morning when I asked White House officials, does President Biden still have confidence in Secretary Austin? And I was told, yes, absolutely, the president has full trust and confidence in Secretary Austin. He's looking forward to him being back at the Pentagon. Kirby, in the air, elaborated on that.
I want to make sure I put a fork in my answer to you. There is no plans for anything other than for Secretary Austin to stay in the job and continuing the leadership that he's been demonstrating.
But Republicans want Austin out. Elise Stefanik's new call for a resignation includes this line: at this dangerous time when American service members are under attack in Iraq and Syria, our closest partner and ally, Israel, is at war with Hamas terrorists, and the threat from communist China is on the rise. It is critical that the Secretary of Defense has the full trust of the American people, Congress, and the White House. Austin himself says he's okay, and that I also understand the media concerns about transparency, and I recognize I could have done a better job ensuring the public was appropriately informed. I commit to doing better, but this is important to say. This was my medical procedure, and I take full responsibility for my decisions about disclosure. Secretary Blinken in the Middle East didn't want to go any further than that.
What is your policy?
Again, I think he put out a statement addressing this. I'll let that statement speak for itself.
What would your policy be about yourself?
Well, I won't get into hypotheticals.
The Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks was on vacation in Puerto Rico January 2nd when she found out Austin's powers were being transferred to her. But she didn't know for 2 more days, till January 4th, that Austin was in the ICU.
Is this acceptable to you? Vice President Pence called it a dereliction of duty.
I don't think it's a dereliction of duty. No, I don't think that at all. I do wish that it had been disclosed, and maybe it was. Maybe just not made public. So I don't know all the particulars here.
We are often told here at the Biden White House that when the president is on vacation, he's not really on vacation because he is always working. President Biden was in St. Croix when Austin went back into the hospital for that pain, for this trip that he's still in the hospital for. And somehow President Biden's work calls from vacation, from the time that he got back to the West Wing, did not reveal that his top military advisor was in a hospital bed. Harris.
I mean, that is just gapingly. I mean, my mouth was just open as you said that. That is gapingly irresponsible. I mean, that is a hole in information at a time when the world, literally parts of it where we're engaged diplomatically in so many ways, is on fire. But this I thought interesting, and I just want to bring this up. In your reporting, the Pentagon #2 was on vacation. And I'm learning that Miss Kathleen Hicks was in Puerto Rico. Now you've just told us that President Biden was on St. Croix. Was anybody picking up their messages? And what if it hadn't been good news? God forbid. Thank the good Lord he's okay, Lloyd Austin. But would anybody have known?
So two things about that. That really undermines the whole idea that President Biden is on these constant work calls while he is on vacation with the family. The other thing, and Kirby was kind of touching the edges of this, but apparently Austin was on a secure call at some point on January 1st, which is the day that he went into the hospital for that post-surgical pain. And Kirby was explaining that the White House Situation Room here underneath the West Wing, which organizes those secure calls, does have to check in with cabinet level secretaries like Austin to know where they are to patch them through. But it's a very general thing. So they just knew that he was in the Washington, D.C. area. They didn't know that he was in a hospital in the Washington, D.C. area.
That's really interesting. All right. Peter Doocy, excellent as always. Thank you. Fox and Friends weekend host Will Cain summed it up this way.
It's kind of important to trust the Pentagon. You know, multiple front wars across the world. The Secretary of Defense is sixth in command, in the chain of command. It's unacceptable for the American public and beyond the ability to even conceive that the President of the United States would not know that the Secretary of Defense is out of commission for a week.
In focus now, Republican Congresswoman Kat Cammack of Florida, member of the subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government. How about the snoozization? That's not even a word. But with somebody asleep with a switch, what in the world? You're a defense secretary.
It's crazy, Harris. I mean, leave it to the Biden administration to take something routine like an elective surgery, which happens often with members of Congress, with members of the administration, and botch it. I mean, this is dangerous incompetence. It's not just incompetence. It's not just a lack of transparency. It is dangerous because not only, which has been pointed out multiple times, are our men and women in uniform and our military installations abroad under constant attack, particularly in the Middle East, but there is a heightened level of engagement around the globe. And when you have the Secretary of Defense, sixth in command, out of commission, his deputy not even knowing that he himself is out of commission in the ICU and on vacation, I mean, this is absurd. This just is another example as to why actions have consequences. And I go back to the 117th Congress, Harris, when there was a vote under Speaker Pelosi to grant a waiver to allow Austin to become Secretary of Defense. Now, the rationale back then was, well, you know, it's been done before, so we should do it again. I was proud that I voted against granting Austin that waiver. He should have never been Secretary of Defense because he was a failed commander when he was in control of Central Command. In fact, when I was at the Naval War College, he was a case study in failures of leadership. We've known back then, and he has demonstrated, whether it was then with the botched Afghanistan withdrawal or now his lack of communication, he is not fit to be the Secretary of Defense.
Look, when we learned about that secure call that's brought about by the Situation Room and all they knew was that he was in the D.C. area, there are so many questions now about, was he trying to hide something? And look, there are HIPAA laws, there are all sorts of things, but there's transparency that people need to know in this country. And we didn't vote for him, as you just pointed out. That's not a person that we voted for. So if they're in charge of something that directly affects our well-being and national security at home and that of our soldiers and all branches of the military around the world, I think we need to know about it as a public. All right, and I'll move on to this. 2 days before the first House hearing on impeaching, speaking of our security, Homeland Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, he is at the border in Eagle Pass, Texas, meeting with officials and Border Patrol agents talking about the illegal immigrant crisis that he has called simply a challenge. House Speaker Mike Johnson was just in Eagle Pass, as we know.
The White House, the administration, Secretary Mayorkas have put a welcome mat out. I believe Secretary Mayorkas is an abject failure, but it's not because of incompetence. I believe he has done this intentionally. I think these are intentional policy decisions that he's made, and I think there must be accountability for that.
Congresswoman.
Harris, as we would say here in the South, he's a real peach. You know, he has lied repeatedly to Congress. He has been negligent in his duties. He needs to go. He needs to be impeached. Our national security depends on it.
Do you think it'll happen?
Absolutely. I have yet to meet one Republican. Heck, I even know of some Democrats that are anxious to get rid of him. And let me remind you, when behind closed doors, we told him, you're getting ready to be impeached. He said, you're not going to like who comes next. I asked him if that was a threat.
Whoa.
He just smiled. This man is dangerous. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he is two-faced. We need to get rid of him now.
What did he mean, who comes next?
Well, that was the big question. I asked him, I said, is that a threat? And he just smiled. And I thought, this man knows exactly what he's doing. This is 100% by design. They want an open border crisis, whether it is for a election, whether it's for future votes as they work to get rid of citizenship as a requirement for voting. We're not sure, but he was very, very clear in what he said, and there were other members in the room. So I will never forget that. And as we go to impeach him for his negligence, for him destroying our national security and eroding our national sovereignty, that will be top of mind.
Yeah, I wish somebody had gotten that on tape so we could play it over and over. Perhaps we will, when you guys go into session with him to ask questions, bring that back up. That sounded like a threat. And as she said, it's got politics behind it. Okay, thank you so very much for being with me, getting us started today. Some big, heavy, important topics today, and we'll move forward. Congresswoman, thank you. Sounds like former President Barack Obama hit the panic button. The former president's reportedly very concerned about the Biden campaign, and he's certainly not holding back his criticism of it. All eyes on Iowa, and I would imagine that includes Barack Obama. If he wants to get worried, he's got to see what the competition is doing. 1 week left until the Iowa caucuses there officially kick off the race for the White House. Candidates making their closing arguments and stepping up their attacks on each other and on the man at the top of the run, Donald Trump. He's going after one rival in particular, his former cabinet member, Nikki Haley. She is rising in the polls, and Trump is warning supporters, take nothing for granted.
Don't stay home, just please, you know. The polls are showing we're going to win by a lot. And worst thing you can do, let's just stay home, Alice. Let's watch it on television. We don't want to do that. You got to get out.
Well, whoever Alice is, she got a shout out. I imagine there are many of those beautiful Alices out there. Meanwhile, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is pushing back on some speculation that he will drop out of the race if he doesn't make a strong showing in Iowa. Here he is.
I put a lot of time in here because I think it's important, and I think that Iowa gives you an opportunity to be on the ground. But anybody saying somehow like we're only doing that's just a flat-out lie. You have to be built for the long haul. Make no mistake. We've got a mission, and we've got to complete this mission. It's a long process. It's an arduous process. I think Iowa is going to be a great way for us to start the process.
Power panel now. Doug Collins, former Republican congressman of Georgia. Patrick Murphy, former Democrat congressman of Pennsylvania. All right, Doug, I'm going to start with you. The president now with his eye on Nikki Haley.
Yeah, I think it's right. I mean, but it's not that much on his eye. His main focus is what he just said. He said, get out the vote. We've been talking about this now, Harris, for over a month, and I think the biggest concern of the Trump campaign is making sure that people come out. And it's going to be really cold on Monday in Iowa, so I think that's going to be the key, is getting those people out there, making sure that they come to vote. Again, the surge in the polls, that I even question calling it a surge of Haley or DeSantis or anybody else, because they're still 20 to 30 points behind in the polls.
True.
The big thing now is just getting those people turned out.
You know what? I have to say it. After having lived in Minnesota, I had a lot of friends in Iowa and Indiana and the Dakotas. A compliment is, you look warm. And however you are dressed to go do whatever you got to do. All right, Patrick, from your side of the aisle, how do you see Iowa at this point in the caucuses coming up? How are you predicting?
I agree with my fellow Iraq War veteran, Doug Collins, and that it is a done deal that former President Trump will win. He's up over 30 points in the polls. But Harris, what people aren't paying attention, just last Friday afternoon, the U.S. Supreme Court said they will hear the Colorado case. Why is that important to Iowa? Because who comes in number 2 will be an incredibly important factor, not just in Iowa, New Hampshire, and elsewhere. Why? Because 6 months from now, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, July 15th, we will have the Republican National Convention. Imagine between now and then if former President Trump is kicked off that ballot. Now, I don't think it's going to happen, but if it does, who comes in number 2 is incredibly important and consequential.
Well, we know that you know, from polling, most of the people who support DeSantis have as their second person Donald Trump. So I don't think it's too far a leap to know that it'll be DeSantis or Nikki Haley. It's not like there's somebody else out there. Although we don't know how Ramaswamy's going to do. He's been to all 99 counties in Iowa twice. Okay, so 3 candidates, 3 town halls, all here on Fox. Tonight, Nikki Haley. Tomorrow, Ron DeSantis. Both are at 6 p.m. Eastern. On Wednesday, Donald Trump at 9 p.m. Eastern. Martha McCallum, Brett Baier will moderate. You don't want to miss it. And the Biden campaign defending its strategy after reports former President Biden went after that campaign. The Washington Post is reporting an animated Obama told Biden and his aides at a private lunch to move aggressively against former President Trump and that they need to hire more top-level decision makers. Ooh, ding. Or light a fire under the ones who already have those jobs. Biden's deputy campaign manager says, there's nothing to see here.
President Obama and President Biden talk frequently, as does the campaign and former operatives from President Biden's administration and his campaign. But the one thing is that we're both aligned on the fact that we have to push back on MAGA extremists and the threat that they pose to freedom and democracy. The president has been very clear that the experience he got as VP serving with President Obama has been critical to the experience that he brings to the job and what he's been able to accomplish.
Reverse order now. Patrick Murphy, your response.
I think the former president, President Obama, and Joe Biden had a great 8 years in the White House, and I think they are still friends, and I do think they are aligned. I also do think that President Obama was saying, hey, listen, Donald Trump is no joke. He's a former president. He's a fighter. You better get your head in the game. I understand governing, and Joe Biden is a workhorse, not a show horse. But he has to communicate to the American people that this is a race that is a contrast between democracy, the rule of law, and the U.S. Constitution, and someone who just wants to disregard it.
Yeah, you know what? He is a show horse. Come on. We remember when he'd go to those car shows and like threaten reporters behind the wheel of really swanky cars, and you know, he loves attention. Stop it, Patrick. But we hear you. Doug.
Well, you know, my fellow veteran, he's giving credit, you know, where he tries to there. Look, the problem is the Democrats don't have a second choice here. There's no plan B. And there are many Democrats who are worried that they're taking this too complacently. And the Biden campaign is trying to run the campaign from the basement again. I think that's going to be something that they're going to come out of. But again, I think if they continue to basically take half the American people and claim that, you know, people who vote for Trump or like Trump in the last election are the folks that we're against here, that's not a real good strategy, because there's a lot of independents in there as well. And especially when you have the Democratic Party, is Patrick brought up just a minute ago, I didn't bring it up, you know, taking candidates off the ballot of private organizations such as the Republican Party on primary ballots. Here's the attack on that they're so frustrated with Trump that they're trying to get him off the ballot. This is the problem the Democrats have. They're going to have to be the ones to defend it.
Well, I'm going to do the full disclosure that Patrick probably forgot to mention. But last week on Outnumbered, he told me that no way should they ever do anything like this. This is a bad decision by Democrats. I remember you saying that.
Yeah,
so you can look gleeful that it might happen, but you don't want this to happen because it's bad for our republic.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely. And so, but I'm just saying that it's consequential when it comes to number 2.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Well, as we get closer to the first primary contest, I mentioned the January Iowa caucuses, and then 8 days later, we'll be in New Hampshire for that. We're revisiting my special series, Democracy 24, Families in Focus, where I sit down with those closest to the presidential candidates. And up first today, for this week, running them, the First Lady of Florida, from those closest to the men and women looking to lead our nation. I traveled to Tallahassee, Florida, the historic People's House of Florida. The state's First Lady, Casey DeSantis, and her family were home from the campaign trail, and we got to chat a while.
You move into the governor's mansion, it's pretty neat.
Yeah.
And it's an honor and it's a privilege, too, to be able to be in a, you know, obviously this is history.
Born in the Midwest, Casey DeSantis tells me it's been a blessed journey to get here.
I grew up in Troy, Ohio, USA, so it's southwestern Ohio, about 45 minutes north of Dayton. I was there just about until high school, and then after that I had the opportunity to go down to Charleston, South Carolina. I went to the College of Charleston. My sister was an Air Force pilot, so she was stationed there in North Charleston. My dad at one point in time was working in Charleston at the Medical University of South Carolina. He was an optometrist, so we had the whole family in Charleston, South Carolina for a while in the Low Country.
So when you were a kid, what were some of the things that you dreamed of doing?
Well, I mean, I was big into horses when I was little, so I always thought that I was going to be riding horses the rest of my life. I was a very, very shy kid. I'm really glad that my parents pushed me to do athletics because not only was it good to get out there and make friendships, but also the competition. And not only winning and the victory, but also learning how to lose. That's one of the hardest things that you have to go through, and then pick yourself up, become resilient.
I know I was surprised to find out that you were NCAA Division I.
I was runner-up, which still burns a little bit because I didn't come out on top.
So, equestrian, and when you say you came in second, you mean nationally?
Nationally, yes, runner-up, NCAA runner-up champion. So
that's amazing.
It was great, but it was still one of those things where you're so close, you know, to winning, but it's all right.
Casey and Governor Ron DeSantis were both college athletes. Sports is a big topic in their home.
There's a huge push to protect young girls in women's sports, to keep it with us and not competing with biological males.
As it should be. I mean, I think that's what we should be doing, and we should have a united voice, and I think that we do. I think there are a lot of Republicans, independents, and Democrats who do not believe that biological men should be taking opportunities from women.
Wow, that's a good one.
How did you meet your husband?
I was working in television, and he was in the Navy. He was stationed at Mayport. He's a JAG officer. And we were happened to be at the same driving range facility. I knew I needed a little bit of help with my golf swing, to be honest with you, and he had a better swing than I did. He ended up driving to go find a place for us to go meet.
How long did you date before you knew, yeah, this is the one?
Well, I knew very quickly after meeting him that he was the one. I mean, you can tell he's funny. He's a great guy to be around. He's very, very, very smart. He has good moral compass.
I think her being from Ohio, my mom being from Ohio, my dad being from Western Pennsylvania, you know, there's just a lot of similarities because, you know, we were raised by, I think, parents that had similar frame of mind.
He has great parents. His mom was a nurse. His dad was somebody who was installing the Nielsen rating boxes on the back of TVs.
Yeah.
They were in Dunedin. But he really worked hard in school and had the opportunity to be able to work his way through Yale and Harvard. And after that, what he decided to do was volunteer to go into the Navy. He wanted to give back to the country that had given him so much, and he saw 9/11 happening.
In 2009, Jill Casey Black became Mrs. Ron DeSantis, and their lives together took off. Her TV career included a stint at the Golf Channel with the show PGA Tour Today. Her newlywed husband, fresh off an illustrious military career, was going into politics.
When I first ran for Congress in 2012, she'd be knocking on doors, these Republican voters' doors, and just think about it, like, you know, you're on TV. When people see you in person, it's kind of a big deal if they know you from TV. So literally someone that they see in the morning show shows up at their doorstep, and they're like, wait a minute, I know you.
To all of those people across the state, our first responders, I want to say thank you.
These days, Casey DeSantis is still famous in Florida as First Lady, with super fame at home for being mom. 6-year-old Madison just started first grade, 5-year-old Mason in kindergarten, and 3-year-old Mamie just began pre-K.
Where are you going? Come back. Do a circle and come back.
They're the first young family to live in the governor's mansion in about 60 years. Mamie is the first baby born in the governor's mansion in about 50 years. And so they have a unique perspective on life. They, you know, they've always had the security detail around them. They think that that's just normal part of life. But they're having fun, and they get a lot of neat opportunities. And also, this is an opportunity for us to be able to teach our kids about what exactly we are fighting for.
I do want to bring up my better half, the First Lady of Florida, to say a few words.
Who are you as First Lady? What defines you?
What defines me as First Lady? I think one who looks at the role with a lot of humility, right? It isn't about me. It is about being in a position to be able to do good on behalf of the people of this state and hopefully of this country.
Tell me about some of the women that you've helped with Hope Florida.
We've been able to transition off, either partly or entirely, more than 8,100 people from government assistance because they're on a pathway to economic self-sufficiency. They're now in homes on their own. They're cooking for their children, literally in tears, because this is the first time that they have a roof over their home, over their house, that they've been able to get on their own.
Casey told me helping others also comes from getting a second chance at life. In October 2021, her husband announced Casey DeSantis had breast cancer.
The day that I ultimately found out, it was Ron who was the one that told me, because I couldn't listen to the doctors. I didn't want to hear any of the opining. I didn't know if I was going to see my kids graduate from kindergarten, let alone going off into high school or watching them walk down the aisle. So I had him every step of the way there as a shoulder to cry on.
How does it make you feel when she talks about survival because of you?
I did my role as what a good husband should do, but she really fought hard. And I'll tell you, once we went public with it, the amount of prayers that we got from Florida and around the country really, really boosted her spirit and my spirit.
But what he did for me in my cancer battle is what he did for the people of this state during COVID, because he went through and he analyzed the data. Just like he fought for me, he fought for the people of this state.
For Families in Focus later this week, I got to spend time with a couple of others, former Ambassador Nikki Haley and her children in their home state of South Carolina. And a wonderful day in New Hampshire on the campaign trail with Dr. Apurva Ramaswamy. She told me what inspired her husband Vivek to run for president. And I got to hold a baby. I've loved this series, loved meeting the DeSantis family. It's really, really been fun. And now it all kicks off with primary season 1 week from today in Iowa. Well, a new chapter in the battle to ban former President Donald Trump from state primary ballots. The U.S. Supreme Court, with a date now to begin oral arguments. It is February 8th. Plus, House Republicans are getting ready to hold the president's son, Hunter Biden, in contempt of Congress.
I hope that we do refer charges for contempt. I'm a Republican who's held Republicans' feet to the fire when they don't show up to Congress with a subpoena. I plan to hold Democrats to the same standard.
Well, it turns out someone appointed by Hunter's father may actually have the final say on all of this. Attorney Phil Holloway in Focus next.